People often ask a question and say, well, what were the big themes that influenced Yeats? And in a sense, I wonder if they don't all, in some respect, come down to just one. Graves famously says there is one story and one story only that is worth your telling. And for Graves, that was the story of the White Goddess. And then in many ways, the pursuit of the muse to which this exhibit is devoted was very central to Yeats. But of course, it wasn't the only thing. And in many respects, the theme that drove really everything in Yeats is described in one of his late poems called What Then?, in which he describes all the things he's achieved in his life. But he says, you swerved in naught, something to perfection brought. Then he says, Plato's ghost, cries Plato's ghost, what then? And in a way, the question, what then, is really the question to which Yeats returns again and again in every poem. It's not explicit, but he's always asking himself, oh, what happens to me or any other human upon their death? And that question was something that drove him from a very young man and right up until his death, when he was still on his deathbed. He was writing a poem called Comforted. Seamus Heaney called it the greatest deathbed poem ever written, which is trying to look beyond that moment which he was then facing, his own death, and to see, in effect, what then? Well, he put it in the form of a question. He asked one time in one of his memoirs, what if our thoughts are not, as we think, the deep, but the foam upon the deep? And he was driven by the thought throughout his life that there was another world, a not material world, that surrounded this one, and that intersected with this one at moments, sometimes passionate moments. And so I think we find in all of his poems an urge to grapple with the relationship between the two worlds. He says, Plato, who thought the world a spume that plays upon a paradigm of things. So that's the great Platonic notion of our world not being the really real, the really world being the ideal world, the paradigm of things. So we find that always kind of driving the Yeats poem. And he asked the question in the great poem 1919, he asked the question, well, is there any comfort to be found? And he says, man is in love, and love's what vanishes. That's all there is to know. And so his poetry, in a way, is a constant search to pursue that question through all the events that occur to him, but they're always driven by a concern about, always, he quotes the, as above, so below, he says, the great Smaragdine tablet said. I mean, the notion that this world is a reflection of a more permanent world elsewhere. And it pops up in every which way in every poem. And he says in the volume, The Tower, he has the poem 1919 when he raises that question of, is there any comfort? And he finds that for an old man, the answer is maybe the same as it was for him as a young man. He says an aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap hands and sing and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. And I think all of his poetry was a reflection of his soul singing something about that other world, and an effort to find it really through expressing it in the poetry.